and I did Lighting Up Pearl Street. So some of my inspirations, if you guys saw from the blog post, were these kind of light up 3D maps. This one's of Manhattan in New York. And I just thought these were the coolest things ever. These are the same project, that they're different colors. They had an alternating color changing LED strip, huge glass table. It was probably like longer than this table. And I just thought it was really a new way to look at maps and that sort of thing, like getting down on eye level, being able to kind of like put yourself in the buildings and walk through them. So that was kind of my main inspiration. Some of my ideas or concepts from the beginning is I want to create an interactive art piece, something I envision that could be out in the public world for people to interact, to create a new experience for. Some of my aesthetics that I had going were the modern aesthetic of form following function. And as you guys can kind of see from my model, it turned into a futuristic sort of aesthetic as well, just based on the materiality, which I'll get into a little later. So the main idea for my project was to be a prototype or an iteration of something that could be displayed out on Pearl Street on a larger scale, maybe touch screen, or even just more wholly interactive and something for the 21st century. Just redesigning a map instead of having a boring, your zoo maps, your museum maps that are flat. You're kind of like, okay, I kind of can tell where I'm going. There's pictures. I just wanted to analyze maps in a new way, recreate just a whole new sort of map for people. So getting into the process, I started in SketchUp. If you guys have worked in there, I used the SketchUp warehouse to import all the buildings on Pearl Street. I went from 11th Street to 15th, which is just like that red brick pavement where cars can't go. And it went pretty well. I haven't worked in SketchUp that much, but I got to that part, and that's when I encountered my first problem. It took a really long time actually to refine that, the plan in SketchUp, draw all the lines of the streets, because you can import from Google Earth like the layout, which is really helpful, so everything's accurate. But to 3D print, which was my original intent, everything has to be a closed object. In the SketchUp warehouse, people just created these buildings, so they're like little finicky lines, everything. I would have had to condense them a lot, and I just didn't have the time or the money to buy the glow-in-the-dark filament that I wanted, so I switched to laser cutting. I used a 1/4 inch clear acrylic. This is kind of this plan for it. They're a 1/4 inch, like 3 high. So the first 2 are hollow to hold LEDs, and the top one is filled and all the way through. And this is what this base map looked like with the etching on the outside, and then cut out holes where the buildings and the LEDs would sit. So this is what it looked like laser cut. I originally wanted to get kind of a transparent or more opaque sort of acrylic, but it was extremely expensive and I didn't want to pay $60 for one sheet. So Katie actually helped me, and she suggested frosted like spray paint, which really helped out all of my design, making it not see-through. You can still kind of see the wiring, which was not my intent, but it's much more shaded and gives it a more clean look. One of the flaws on my part for this one was not laser cutting with a piece of paper underneath, so it burned some of the acrylic into it, making it not as clean. So that's something I would change in the future. So the wiring. I have actually never soldered or worked with circuits or electronics, so I had my friend Brad help me out with this part. He taught me to solder, which was really cool because I've never done it before. It was like magic. And we sat and he showed me how it all worked. I learned more about like resistors, capacitors, and it was really interesting and very complex figuring out how it all worked together and why some currents wouldn't go through when we wanted them to. And then get on. This is the final product, which I'll turn on. We can turn off the lights and turn it on in a minute. So the red button, or the red switch, is for dining, the different dining areas on Pearl Street. The blue is for clothing areas, and the green is kind of the others or retail. And you guys can come up and look. The building, it's like that one. The opera-shaped one is the courthouse, so you can kind of orient yourself where you are. Then I have some other just pictures of them all on, the reflectiveness, and then, yes, how it all looks all together. And my budget was $115, which is a little more, but it mostly came from the acrylic, so I couldn't really do anything about that cost. Do you guys have any questions? It was kind of quick. All right, yeah, I can turn off the lights.
I'm curious, so all of the buildings on Pearl Street had already been modeled by somebody?
Yes, in SketchUp Warehouse, it was amazing. It took a while to find them because they wouldn't name them very well. I'd have to search through them, but most of them were already designed and modeled, and they had like the painted on facade of what it looked like. It was really cool. They were just, some of them were quite poorly made. Like it just wasn't ready, you couldn't just 3D print that building, which was my intent. I was like, oh, this is great, but a lot of them were just finicky or they were hollow.
Okay.
They weren't perfect, so
Okay.
it was really cool though.
Interesting, I had no idea.
Yeah, it looks, I don't know, what are these?
Oh, here. Here we go.
Yeah, it's just,
Nice.
yeah, it's super,
Cool
I
tones.
think it's fun. And then like the ceiling turns a cool color, which is fun, so like,
Yeah.
when it mixes different hues, but yeah. You guys can come up and play with it later, feel free. It's just super awesome.
So which is your favorite restaurant?
The Cheesecake Factory.
Oh.
Which is, someone at the expo, they could tell, they were like trying to guess the different ones, and we're like, oh, is this it? And I was like, yes, it